Welcome back to the Sonny Talk Spurs YouTube channel, and it's a monumental game yet again in the Europa League for Tottenham. I say that every time we play in this competition because it's always a bit make or break for the club, for the players, and Ange Postecoglou. And to preview this monumental game against Bodo Glimt, I'm joined by the one and only Barnaby Slater. How are you doing, Barnaby?
Yes, thanks so much for having me on. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, I keep using the word monumental, but it just is a massive fixture in more ways than one, as I say, for the manager's future, for future of some of these players, and to hopefully move on one more or two more games to go to Bilbao and hopefully lift this competition and get somehow back in the Champions League. But my first question is going to be not so much about reacting to that Liverpool game, because the dust has settled after that, another 5-1 battering from them. What do you think in regards to preparation? Is this the perfect or the worst preparation? Because I know we made 8 changes and a
Mm.
lot of them didn't start, but there were some people on the pitch, Solanke, Kulusevski, who probably will feature on Thursday. So how do you see the preparation for this game after that result?
Yeah, I have to say at this point, I actually agree quite a lot with Danny Kelly, who I was listening to the View from the Lane podcast yesterday, which is so good. Make sure you listen to it if you don't already. And he was saying he just thought there were too many players on the pitch who were going to play on Thursday. And I have to say, I'm finding it difficult at times not to contradict myself, because when you watch Spurs and they get battered like we did on Sunday against Liverpool, obviously you're angry and you're like, I wanted us to pick a better team. I wanted us to do better and try harder. But then also, basically, for the last 2 months, I've also been saying, wrap Mickey van der Ven in cotton wool. Don't play him. Don't play Christian Romero. Play weakened teams. And so I'm going to have to stick, I guess, to that and say, yeah, I think in the beginning when I was doing a watch along and I was reading out the teams, I was surprised that he played, I'd say, at least 4 players who you will expect to start on Thursday night. Vicario, Udogi, Bergvall, and Solanke at the very least. And I guess Kulusevski, I would think, will start on the right on Thursday. So I get that thing of trying to keep minutes in their legs and what have you, but also just we know, Sonny, and we've discussed it before. We know those mix and match sides that we pick, they don't work. They just don't work. So a little bit I was like, do you know what? If we're going to go down 5-1 to Liverpool, do I actually think if he'd played Scarlett, Ajayi, Mikey Moore and those kind of boys, do I really think we'd have lost more than 5-1? I actually don't, because I think they would have probably gone into 50-50 challenges about 25% harder, and kind of they would have worked about 25% harder because they wouldn't have had any thought of, I'm going to play Thursday night, so I don't want to get injured. And the motivation levels will have been a bit higher as well. So that was kind of my surprise. But listen, we came out of it with no injuries, and now, as ever, we say, if we win handsomely on Thursday against Bodo Glimt and go into that second leg feeling really confident, no one's going to be talking about that Liverpool game.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I feel like I contradict myself because I go like, forget the Premier League, but then a 5-1 battering away at
Mm.
Anfield. Like we did expect, I like wasn't
It's just
expecting us
human
to.
nature, though, Sonny, isn't it? It's just human nature that you react to what's in front of you. And we've
Mm.
invested decades of our lives in this toxic relationship with this football club. And therefore, you can't. Listen, look, I think that game on Sunday was probably as close as I've ever come to really not caring, because Solanke scored and I didn't raise a smile. Like, I
Yeah, I
honestly, it
just went,
was,
oh, hello.
I didn't even go, oh, I just went, oh, we've scored from a corner. That's so unlike. And in fact, I think I was still surprised, because if I remember rightly, they just put the graphic up before that corner. I think it was that corner. It might be one of the others. But where they said that Spurs had scored 9 times from corners this
Yeah,
season. I was like, which 9 are they? I
yeah.
don't
Honestly,
remember that. I know Bentancur's got a couple.
I was shocked when I saw that as well. It's just I feel like this season when you see some of the stats around us, and it's like the goal difference. When people go, how is Spurs' goal difference so high for where they are? I was like, we beat Southampton 5-0. That
Mm.
will outweigh your goal difference.
We beat Man City 4-0 away, and we've scored
Exactly.
we scored 3 at Old Trafford, didn't we? So yeah, goal scoring isn't the problem, but Thursday night will be important in terms of not conceding goals, that's for sure. Because if we go there, I think if we concede a goal, we're going to need to score 4 to go to Norway with any kind of confidence, I think.
Yeah, I agree, but I feel like when I watched Bodo Glimt's highlights against Lazio in the previous round, they are. It's hard to sum them up as a team because they're quite plucky, and that does sound quite rude when you talk about maybe a minor European team. But they do show fight, and they did lose that game, I think 3-1, but they were 2-0 up in the previous leg at their ground. So I just feel like when it comes to facing these teams, but the thing is with Tottenham, well, there's two things I take from this. We went to Tamworth, didn't we? And we had to take that to extra time, and that was on a 4G pitch when we went to theirs. And, I'm thinking of the NS Muras of this world, the, Dynamo Zagreb's. Sometimes when there's a banana skin, we do tend to slip. So do you see this as, a lot of Spurs fans, I think the general media, what I've seen, have all been like, oh, you're going to batter them, you're going to, it'll be easy. But I think your humble Spurs fan does sit there and go, wait, we'll just take a game at a time. So where do you sit on that side of the fence?
Well, I would be disappointed if I read much stuff from the kind of mass media suggesting it'll be easy, because it's so simple to look at their results, especially at home in Europe over the last few years. They've absolutely pulverized Roma. They've beaten Lazio. They've beaten Olympiacos, and they beat Ange Postecoglou Celtic over 2 legs very easily. So that would be a bit of lazy journalism, I think, just kind of going by name. What you mentioned earlier, the key point, I think, about them is that they're a team. They are a proper team. And like I said, I was listening to View from the Lane yesterday, and I listened to the Tottenham Way as well. And they both had experts on Bodo Glimt on. And what both those experts talked about was just how well drilled and well coached they are. And they both alluded to the idea that this will really be a team against a team of individuals. And it'll be, the winner will be the team or the club that utilizes what they're good at best. So if Spurs' individual players come to the fore over these 2 legs and show moments of brilliance, then we will win the tie. But if they don't, as they haven't been in the Premier League recently, then I think it could be a big problem. And also, both those experts were both suggesting Spurs need to probably be 3 or 4 goals up from the first leg to put Bodo Glimt in a situation where they're like, oh, this is going to be difficult. Now, what I would say is that could be an exaggeration, because I really do think Tottenham, it's not like they're going to go to Bodo Glimt and not turn up and not be up for it. I think they're going to properly be up for it, and it's a European semi-final. And I think they will have seen what happened to Lazio, especially because it was so recent, like recency bias, and they'll be like, okay, we cannot be complacent. So I think 2-0 potentially. If we won 2-0 at home, I think we'd probably be okay, because I think Bodo Glimt would have to come at us and they'll leave spaces. And also, both those experts said they're not great defensively either. They're really good offensively. They utilize the fast 4G pitch, and that's what they really talked about, how it's just so quick that a lot of the time defenders get surprised at how quick the surface is, whereas the Bodo Glimt players are really used to it. And then also it can really affect the triggers for your press. And they were saying that if Postecoglou Spurs try and kind of go gung-ho pressing, then that could really cause them trouble. Now, what I like about the last 3 weeks or so is actually against Frankfurt away, we didn't really try that. We actually did something a bit different. We sat deeper, we played it a bit longer, fed off the scraps. And if we get a kind of 2-goal lead, then hopefully they won't go there with any complacency. They won't try and press them out of the game. And they'll just say to Bodo Glimt, come and try and get past us, and we'll hit you on the break. But maybe that's best. Maybe that's, wishful thinking, because like you said, we're Spurs fans, so we are used to those, particularly the time where we were 3-0 up, weren't we, and lost to a team whose manager was in prison or whatever. So,
yeah, that was Dynamo Zagreb. I think we were 2-0 up and lost 3-2.
Right.
And he was in prison.
So anything could happen. But my key point, the key thing that I really want to see is no complacency, work really hard, keep it tight at the back. I said it after the last game against Frankfurt. Van de Ven really does elevate us about 20-25%. So that should be important. And those guys, both those kind of experts, I can't remember their names. It seems rude saying they're experts, but they're Norwegian journalists. But they both kind of said, I expect Tottenham to go through, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. So they're kind of like 60-40. They think Tottenham should go through. But a lot of that is obviously down to the fact that they've got 3 suspended, including Berg from the first leg, and potentially 2 injuries as well. One to the centre half, which they were saying is massively important, that he would miss out if he does. And then one, I think, to their backup striker. So that is why I think they're erring on about 60-40 to Spurs, whereas they probably would have gone 50-50 otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, referencing that Lazio game, in attack, they look really good. The way they sort of move the ball around, the crossing was really, really impressive. But at the back, Pedro, obviously former Barcelona, Chelsea, when he was giving them like a torrid time, and you got to think of how old he is now, and maybe the pressures of being an away stadium like the Olympic Stadium, like that would give them sort of, the nerves would kick in for a Bodo Glimt. And it's funny you mentioned that there, because I've got it on my screen next to me about their sort of injury and their crisis that they're in at the moment. And it reads, Bodo Glimt have lost a further 2 defenders to injury today, in addition to their right back, who was injured last week. The Norwegian outfit also have 3 players suspended for Thursday, including midfielder Patrick Berg. So, I mean, that is quite monumental. And against a team who has, like us, suffered with injury and, suspensions and stuff like that over the season, it is quite some promising news, especially now, Barnaby, as we've got nearly our full fit team back, minus Son, who still is questionable ahead of this one.
Yeah, and they, when I watched the last half an hour of the Lazio tie at Bodo Glimt in the first leg, and they were 2-0 up, and they should have scored 3 more in that period. But I really noticed that day. I was like, this kid Berg is decent. He's really running it. Everything was going through him. And then, just to mention these Norwegian journalists again, they were basically describing him as the conductor and that he is the most important player in their side. So that seems like a really important one for the home leg. But just to play devil's advocate, look, Spurs have come up against low blocks at our place for the last 2 years and struggled. So, my instinct is, with 3 players suspended and potentially 2 more out, they'll just be like, right, we're just going to sit on the edge of our 18-yard line and make it difficult. However, to then play devil's advocate on myself again, what I really love about having Van der Ven and Romero is that automatically our line is basically 10 yards inside the opposition's half. And that makes it incredibly difficult for that low block opposition to ever get out, because they clear it and it either hits Van der Ven, he controls it on his chest and we start again, or it goes over his head and no one can run past him, so he picks it up and they start again. So potentially, if Bodo Glimt can't get out for kind of the whole game, and if we could get an early goal, I think the atmosphere would be absolutely rocking in there. They're doing the Tifo, they're doing the flags. It's a European semi-final. Everybody is, despite the kind of toxicity at the club at the moment and the fact that the fans really have lost faith in Ange, I think they won't care about that tomorrow night as long as things are going well. And you could easily see a way that Spurs could put 3 or 4 past them. But I think it's dependent on making sure we keep it tight and ideally get an early goal. And it could be a great night. But for me, there's no way I feel confident going to Norway unless we've got 4.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was like, 2, 3, 4, 5 maybe, and then we'll be comfortable. Because
I think we could be okay with just 2, but I'm talking about like feeling confident, because if they needed to score 4, then they're just going to have to really go for it, and then you can play. Then that is a situation you'd be in where actually I think Brennan Johnson would even really flourish with real room behind to get in. But listen, it's it's wishful thinking.
Yeah, that's what worries me at the moment in regard to like the amount of mistakes we're making at the moment, and just like if we have a couple of them again, then they could run riot in their gaff. But before I get your thoughts on more of the lineup and what you want to see from that, I want to just get your thoughts on the news around Ange Postecoglou's future. And I mean, it feels quite inevitable, but there's reports saying that no matter what happens in the Europa League, if we win this round, if we get to the final, if we win the final, he could still be off. What are you making of that at the moment?
Yeah, I think everybody kind of feels like that's the likelihood. My instinct, I've probably said this to you before, maybe on my channel, but if he won the Europa League, I think Ange would resign. And I think I think he would put himself in a brilliant position if he did that. I think that would be like the most ideal situation for him, and in some ways the club as well. And maybe even Daniel Levy would be in such a kind of good place then in his own spirits that he would be like, listen, if you want, you can say you resigned and I'll still give you some of your compensation, because it would suit Ange, it would suit the club, and it would enable Ange to get another job in a relatively good league somewhere. So I think that, in a best case scenario, I think that is quite likely to happen. In the instance that we lose to Bodo Glimt, I think he goes probably within an hour, 2 hours, or the next morning, honestly, because just the league form, there's just, imagine this, we lose to Bodo Glimt. The next game, I believe, is the game where they're planning the next protest. Is it Palace? I think it might be Palace.
So Palace is this Sunday. Yeah, that's Palace.
Oh, okay. So then it would be the next game after the next leg, whatever. I thought it's West Ham this week, then Palace after that.
Let me have a look.
Yeah, but anyway, either way, I know because I was listening to the Fighting Cock and Flav was saying another podcast that your viewers, if they don't,
you're right. It's West Ham then Palace.
Right. So if we were to lose to Bodo Glimt after the second leg, the weekend game is Palace, and they're doing another change for Tottenham protest, and that would be if we go out to Bodo Glimt, that would be the most toxic we've ever seen it at Tottenham, and I think Levy, between the Thursday and the Sunday, would look to sack Ange to be like, look, I'm making changes already to try and cover himself a little bit, but it wouldn't stop the toxicity. So unfortunately for Ange, the thing for me there are a few things for me. I still like him. I still want him to lift the trophy. Of course I do. But the thing for me that's really changed, he started saying the maddest stuff in press conferences to try and cover his back. Like the whole bit that he came out with last week of, oh, people are saying how amazing all those clubs are who are vying for 5th place this year, but everybody said it was a disaster when I got my Spurs team 5th place last year. Well, hold on, mate. That is because we were totally appalling after the first 10 games. We only got 5th because of those first 8 wins out of the first 10 games, and everything after that was dross. So the reason why they were saying that it was a disaster was because for the last 6 months it had been a disaster. And then also the reason why everyone's waxing lyrical about those clubs fighting for the 5th place, is because one of them is Nottingham Forest, and that's a great story. And of course the main reason is because 5th place is definitely Champions League this year, whereas by this time last year we knew that probably 5th place last year wasn't going to be Champions League. So that's another example for me of Ange just kind of trying to misdirect people in the press, and people are too smart for that. And he's just he's just lost the plot a little bit in terms of what he's saying. And I get it. Look, it's human nature. He knows he's losing his job. Like, he knows he is.
He said it, isn't he? He said it in after the win. He was like, "You're gonna have to, keep
deal
up
with me for a bit longer."
Yeah.
So he's basically firefighting for future career opportunities, and that's fair enough. But look, his best firefight is in this tournament, and he knows that. And in a weird way, backs against the wall, it might suit us more than any situation we've been in tournaments before, because we're not battling for a top 4, top 5 place. So he is resting all the players, and nobody is trying in the Premier League. So really, when you look at Tottenham, other than Man United, they're the only club left in this tournament who are only having to play at their maximum for potentially 3 more games this season. And that is probably the reason why there's a high chance it could be a Tottenham Man United final, because all those other clubs are fighting for something else.
Yeah, I mean, with Man United and Bilbao, I think Bilbao could rip them to shreds. I could really see. I mean, I think at the weekend they rested. I don't think any of the Williams brothers travelled to Real Madrid or wherever they played. So you can tell a lot of them are putting their eggs in this basket.
Well, look, Sonny, I'll tell you what. I do think you're right. Logic suggests and form suggests you're right. But there's something about, and this is where I don't wholly disagree with what Jamie Carragher said on the overlap. Athletic Bilbao will go into that game being like, we're playing Man United. I don't think they'll go into being like, we're playing this Man United. They'll be like, oh, Man United have won so many European trophies and they're this juggernaut and whatever. So there'll be some pressure based on that. And so I'm just saying to you, it could happen that they'll rip them apart, but I don't think it will. And I think it'll be tight. Because I thought Sociedad would rip them apart and Lyon would beat them, and Man United found a way. So I don't know. It would not surprise me at all if Man United are in that final.
Yeah, I just think after watching Man United versus Bournemouth and how underwhelming they were against them, I know they found a way to salvage a draw, and there was maybe a lucky red card. I just think United, it is that way though. The last 2 years, under Erik ten Hag, they found a way to win 2 cup competitions domestically. Yeah. So,
but also because the pressure comes off, doesn't it? The pressure comes off, and that again, it's similar to what I was saying about why I think there's a high chance it could be United Spurs final, because no other club left in the competition is the pressure going to be off when they come to these games. So it's almost like, imagine the players walking into the stadium, they suddenly don't feel as tense as they do for the Premier League games. And they're like, oh, this is, this is a bit more of a no lose no lose gamble isn't right, but more like, we can play how we know we can play. I don't know. Listen, it's Spurs, so who knows? But pressure is a huge thing, and motivation is a huge thing, and those kind of marginal gains, to coin a well-used phrase, such a huge thing in elite level sport. And I think that's why we saw the Frankfurt performances just like eons away from any of the other performances we've seen for so long. And that's what Ange will, just to bring it back round to your initial question about Ange, that's what Ange will bring up after the season when he has his meeting with Daniel Levy. If Daniel Levy asks him, he says, why do you think I should let you keep your job? And they say, well, look at the Frankfurt games. That they were a team who were third in the Bundesliga, and everyone expecting them to roll us over. And actually, when I've got my team out, they can play like that. But for me, if I was Daniel Levy in that instance, I'd be like, yeah, but what about all the other games?
Yeah, and then like Ange could argue, oh, but Scott Munn got rid of the medical department, and look at how that's impacted. But that's another conversation for another day. Just quickly on Ange, from my point of view, I still think he his final nail in the coffin was the way he acted around that Manchester City game last season, and rightly or wrongly,
that is an early nail in the coffin, Sonny.
I just feel like the way he approached that, considering he's managed Old Firm derbies and just not, I feel like that's when a lot of fans started to turn, because they thought, right, why are you coming for us? The rivalry against Arsenal. I know. Thing is, a lot of it was quite jovial, about us, doing the some fans were doing the Poznan and all that. So I do think it was quite jovial, but I still think the way that was the first sign of him getting a bit more spikier in interviews. And then we went on that horrid run where, we lost against Chelsea, we lost against Arsenal, like so many bad, I think it was like 8 games in a row we lost or something like that. So it's when he was saying this stuff about fifth last year, I did sit there and think like, but are we just forgetting how, after that Chelsea game, it basically capitulated, and the only good game afterwards, I thought, at the end of that season was against Villa away, where we won 4-0. And that was probably because Unai Emery overthought it and he decided to change his system, and it just didn't work. So, yeah, I mean, I'm similar with you. I wanted Ange to work. I loved him, but I just feel like it's like when someone cheats on you. You just can't, you're not sure whether you can forgive them, or, it could never get back to what it could be. So speaking of lineups, just a plain and simple question here. Who do you want to see? Like, is there an Udogie, a Spence, a Porro? Like, how is your team set up for this game?
Yeah, so I'm just going to do this off the top of my head. I mean, I think it will be incredibly similar to the Frankfurt game. So I think it'll be Vicario, Porro on the right, Udogie on the left, Van de Ven and Romero, Bentancur, Bergvall, Maddison. And then I think it'll be Kulusevski on the right, Tell on the left, and Solanke up front. I think he'll want Kulusevski in because he's got minutes in his legs, even though he hasn't looked fresh since he's come back, but he's got enough minutes in his legs. I think he'll want that experience. I think he'll know, kind of knowing that it's likely to be a low block we're facing at home, that we're not going to get much space in behind out wide. So we're going to need to be a little bit more intricate. And Kulusevski's one of the few players who you could see, popping one in from outside the box if needed. So I would imagine he'll go for that. Son, it doesn't seem like will be fit for the first leg. Last things that Ange has been saying, he said hoping that he'll be fit for the second leg, maybe on the bench for the first leg. But also I think it helps Ange that Son has not been in great form anyway, so it won't be a huge story to start Tell. And I think Tell looks to me like he's getting more and more confident, getting better and better. And if we have Kulusevski on the right, then maybe that'll take some of Bodo Glimt's thought process away from Tell, and they'll kind of try and double up on what he's doing, and that might give Tell even more space. The only possibility, would I want to look at Odobert on the right and Kulusevski instead of Mathys in the middle? The reason I'm going to say, for me, I would choose to keep Mathys in there is because what Mathys does in the 10 or the 8-10 role that Kulusevski doesn't is he comes really deep to get on the ball and tries to play that quarterback role, and he gives options to Vicario and he gives options to the two centre-backs in doing that. Kulusevski kind of doesn't have any interest in doing that. And that leaves us sometimes, especially in terms of trying to play it out from the back, in a bit more trouble, because Vicario's passing, I mean, as we saw against Liverpool at the weekend, it can be, he's not a terrible passer of the ball, but it can be a yard or two either side, and that can put those players under pressure. So when there's an extra player there helping out Bentancur and Bergvall in Maddison, I feel more comfortable when that happens. So my instinct is that it will be Maddison in the 8-10, Kulusevski on the right. If not, then I think it would be Odobert on the right and Kulusevski instead of Maddison, and Maddison on the bench. And the only thing that makes me wonder whether that's a possibility is the fact that he started Maddison at the weekend, but he did bring him off early. And also bear in mind, Maddison hadn't played since he got that head knock in the second leg against Frankfurt. So maybe he was just checking on him to see if he's, up to speed. And I have to say, based on his performance against Liverpool, I wouldn't suggest he necessarily is. But I'm sure if the doctors say that he's not concussed, then he's not concussed. I don't know. What would you go for?
I like the idea of your team because I feel like we are lacking creativity in this side. So I feel like we need to have both Kulusevski and Maddison on there. Tell, I thought, was fantastic. I mean, I've been a big critic of him. I thought he was fantastic against Frankfurt. Not so much against Liverpool, but I don't think anyone had a good game against Liverpool. Again, Solanke, I thought was good against Frankfurt. And I just still, like, anyone who gives him hate, I just don't like it. I feel like he's just at the wrong place at the wrong time. I thought it was going to work in an Ange Postecoglou system. It just hasn't. I feel like Brennan Johnson is better to come on in the latter stages of games like this, maybe when the Bodo Glimt are a bit knackered and he can go at them and he's more of an impact substitution. Even though I've criticised the midfield, I think that's the perfect blend, which is weird to say because Bergvall offers you that sort of dogged approach. He'll break up the play. He'll, break the lines and box to box. I feel like he's just that sort of player. And even Bentancur, I'm starting every player's name with I've criticised because of where we are in the league. But again, amazing against Frankfurt and showed that he is still our strongest six. I feel like, a Basuma, even a Bergvall can't really play there. And Archie Gray just hasn't been given the chance. I mean, he was at the weekend, but I feel like this would be a bit of a risk just chucking him in. And then same with the defence. I think what I was impressed with was I think Udogi's come back into form after coming back from his injury. We weren't sure. Spence, I just don't think he's comfortable now on the right, which is so weird to say considering that's his preferred position. But I just feel like he's a really good left back. And Porro, I feel like Porro needs a chance in this game because I feel like we need to really go out attack, and he is our best attacking fullback still.
Yeah, and a great crosser of the ball as well. And listen, there is some part of me that thinks, is Ange really willing to, live by the sword, die by the sword? And he could play, if he wanted to go out fighting, he could play Bergvall instead of Bentancur, and then he could play Kulusevski and Maddison like he did against deep block teams early in the season. And it kind of worked. But the difference is, well, the reason I don't think he will is because in those Frankfurt games, I thought Bentancur played well, both defensively and kind of bringing the ball forward. And I think it's just a little too brave, even for Ange, to go, oh, we're actually going to go full gung-ho, like on Football Manager when you press gung-ho and you go like 4-2-4 or whatever. I think it's just a step too far. But to help with the creativity, I completely agree with you in that Kulusevski and Maddison doubles the creativity we have. But that's why I would also have Porro, because he can get crosses in, and also he's got a long shot. We don't have many, like I said earlier, we don't have many players who are going to hit long shots. And when you're playing a deep block, sometimes the best thing you can do is have a dig. It might ricochet off two people and falls into the path of Solanke or goes in off someone's arse or something. So sometimes you need a bit of that luck, but you need to make your own luck. And having Porro on the pitch, I think, over Spence. And that's not to say that, Spence has been one of our best players this season, but I think Ange picking Porro and Udogi for these European games, certainly against Frankfurt, proved to be the right decision. And I would suggest it is again.
And also, Porro and Kulusevski work well when they're both on the right-hand side. I remember that last year, just really good, like overlapping and underlapping each other. Actually, little question here. If Son is fit, at the time of recording, this is Tuesday lunchtime, there's not been much news about Son. Would you start him as the option on the left if he's fit?
No, I wouldn't. Okay. And I know, I don't know how many South Korean fans you've got, and maybe I'll get some hate for this, but that's fine. but like I said, I think Ange is in a good position on Son because I think, maybe I've said this to you before, but I think Sonny in the last month or two before his injury has reminded me of Harry Kane in the Euros, where I was just saying throughout the Euros, Kane is about 40% off his usual levels. He's clearly playing with an injury, and he's probably even taking painkilling injections. And you know what? The other moment where I said the same thing was Kulusevski in the last month or two before his injury. And I was like, he's about 40% off it. He's playing through an injury. And then suddenly they get injured. And then the manager says, oh yeah, he's been playing through a bit of soreness. And it's like, well, just learn off it and give them a rest at the start. So I think Ange's in a good position because Sonny has clearly had an injury that he's been playing through for a while. Hopefully this time off has properly got to the bottom of that. But no, I think the other kind of telltale factor that will help Ange not to pick Son, and why I wouldn't pick Son, is how Kulusevski has played since he's come back. He's been ring rusty, and it does take you a while. So I think what your point about Brennan Johnson coming off the bench is a good one, and I think second leg maybe having Son coming off the bench as well, really good option there. If we, maybe it's level at that point and we need something special, think about Bodo Glimt's players. They're suddenly seeing coming off the bench one of the most famous footballers in the world, who they know is an elite finisher, and suddenly they wouldn't be thinking, oh, he's been off form recently or he's just been injured. They'll be thinking, oh, he could put one in the top corner. We've got to double up on him, and that could leave space elsewhere. Or Sonny could come back and you wouldn't put it past Sonny to make this journey about him again. And the narrative, he is the captain of the club and he wants to lift this trophy, and he might save us at the back end of a horrible game on a 4G pitch in the Arctic Circle.
That's why we always remember he was the one who was really pulling us through in that Champions League run against Manchester City, especially in that quarter-final. So to wrap up then, Barnaby, let's get your predictions, how you see the game going. What we'll do is because obviously this is going out before the first leg, we'll get your prediction of how you see the first leg going, and then sort of like a big conclusion of the overall tie, I think.
Well, I'm going to give you... Do you know what? I'm so bad at betting usually. I actually gave up betting a year or two ago. But I said before Liverpool at the weekend, I actually looked on the betting sites at what the odds were on Spurs to lose by 4 or more goals. And it was 9-2. And I was like, oh, so if I put 100 quid on that, I would get back like 500, 600 quid or whatever. And I was really tempted. So recently I've been knowing my ball a bit better. So this is with my kind of Spurs supporter hat on and everything. I'm going to suggest that we will win 3-1 in the home leg. I cannot see us not conceding some wild goal. Like, again, against Liverpool, Spurs finding ways to concede more and more embarrassing goals and ridiculous goals. So can I see Vicario trying a pass that he doesn't need to do and them picking us off and him getting lobbed from 30 yards or something? Maybe. So 3-1 at home. And so that, I think, is going to lead to us all being very scared going over to Norway. And maybe it'll go to extra time over there. I could see that. I could see them winning 2-0 or 3-1 away. Sorry, at their place. And it going to extra time. But then I'm going to say overall, Tottenham will find a way. Be that last minute goal, penalties, will find a way. Although I don't think I've experienced Tottenham winning a penalty shootout in a really important game. We won one at MK Dons, didn't we? When we played that home game at MK Dons in the League Cup. Dele Alli scored a penalty there, I remember. But we lost at home to Norwich in the FA Cup on pens. We lost to PSV when Huelio Gomez was their goalkeeper and he saved them in the UEFA Cup. I don't know. I don't remember too many good penalty shootouts. But
Chelsea in the Carabao
Cup at home, wasn't it? Yeah. That's a good one.
Maybe.
But listen, the reason I'm going to say if it goes to pens, we'll win it. Vicario had a reputation of being a brilliant penalty saver in Italy, and he hasn't, by my reckoning, saved one for Spurs yet. So I'm going to say it's going to go to pens, and Big Vic is going to shove it all down our throat, us getting annoyed with his form recently. He'll save 2 pens, and we'll just about scrape through. That's what I'm going to say. But if we were to, listen, it also would not surprise me if we found a way to lose 2-1 at home. So
I'm going to go with, I think we'll win 2. I'll go with 2-0. Somehow I think we're going to keep a clean sheet. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to, this is the game where, I was surprised we kept a clean sheet against Frankfurt in Frankfurt. So,
True.
I'm going to just go against the grain. 2-0, and then we go out there and we draw 1-1. But it's a bit nervy, and we still are not sure whether it's comfortable enough.
Concede the first one. Concede the first one,
and we're like, oh, hello, we got to come out a bit here. So I can just see it happening because, even when we played Southampton the other week, we weren't that good. They were a bit better than us, and even despite all them not really having too many chances, they still scored. So there is always that thing with Spurs where
they'll be more up for it than they were against Southampton, though. They'll be more up for it. That's what we've got to hang our hats on, I hope.
Yeah, I'm trying to be positive, Barnaby. Hopefully, you've brought some more positive energy out. But thank you very much for joining me on
No
this
problem.
Bodo Glimt Spurs preview. Where can people watching this who don't know you find you?
Yes, for any of you guys who are subscribed to Sonny's brilliant channel,
Thank you.
I keep calling him Sonny because of Son Heung-Min. I know it's Sonny. I cannot help myself. I
I
apologize.
don't mind, honestly.
But any subscribers there who are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, come over for daily Tottenham content. I'll be doing a lot of transfer stuff during the summer. And also, I just today released a little documentary that's a bit of a positive slant on the last time Tottenham won the UEFA Cup Europa League in 1984 and comparing it to our run this season. So go to youtube.com/at Barnaby Slater _ That's my channel, at Barnaby Slater _ Thank you.
Yeah, I've watched that little documentary and I really, really enjoyed that when you sent it in the WhatsApp group this morning. So
Top man. Thank you, mate.
cheers for that. Yeah, but yeah, as I say, and Barnaby said there, if you want to go to his channel, go and subscribe. He's got a Patreon as well. Hit that up. And also, if you've enjoyed this video, leave your likes, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stay tuned for my reaction where hopefully I'll be reacting to a win for the mighty Tottenham Hotspur. But until next time, up the Spurs and see you guys soon. Bye.